welcome to Early Childhood Ireland's podcast, which features interviews and discussions on all issues relating to high quality in the early years and school age care sector. In our episodes, we have a range of speakers who are leaders in the areas that matter to Early Childhood Ireland members. This podcast series is proudly supported by Aricus Insurance, which offers a comprehensive range of cover at discounted premiums for both business and personal insurance products. So pop over and visit www.aricus.ie for more information. In this series, we're exploring the Reggio Emilia philosophy, tying in with the exciting news about the National Pyjama Day Reggio Emilia project. In previous episodes before Christmas, we spoke about the Reggio Emilia term, the 100 languages of children. And in this series, we're actually exploring the philosophy in more detail. If you heard the last episode with Milica Atanaskovic, you'll have heard her speaking about how and why the approach was developed after World War II. And in that episode, I mentioned that we'd be chatting with some members of Early Childhood Ireland who were actually in Reggio Emilia before Christmas. So I'm really delighted today to be joined by Orlagh Doyle and Anne Warren. Orlagh is the owner of Carraig Briste and Killegney early years and school age care settings in Wexford. She and her husband James work full-time in both settings with their highly qualified management teams. They're committed to the provision of high quality care through their continuous involvement in reflection and participation in programmes to support excellence. Anne is room leader and lead educator with the Learning Tree in Dublin. She's worked for the setting now for just over 3 years. She runs a morning preschool session and after school evening session. And as I said, both Anne and Orlagh attended our Early Childhood Ireland's most recent study trip to Reggio Emilia. So Anne and Orlagh, you're both really welcome. Thanks for coming on the podcast to talk to me today.
Right, Maya. Thank you.
So firstly, I'll ask you both to tell me a little bit about your settings, where you're based, the age range, your approach to curriculum and so on. Orlagh, I'll start with you.
Okay, Maura, so we're based in Wexford, just outside Enniscorthy town for both of the settings. So we have actually babies actually right up into school years. We're very rural, and yeah, our approach would be a combination of definitely Reggio Emilia, Montessori, and then kind of Astra and Shield have a huge influence with this as well. So it's just a combination that I have actually brought together based on our own principles and our own ethos. And thankfully it's working very well. Yeah.
And Anne, can you tell us about the Learning Tree?
Hi, Maura. So I'm based in Drumcondra, Dublin 9. We have a wonderful space, a wonderful environment. There's a little farm in the area. There's 2 playgrounds. We, like Orlagh, they go from babies right up until school age. And of course we run an after school program as well. We would use a blended curriculum, so predominantly it's Montessori and Reggio Emilia, but there would be aspects, of high scope. I think my manager Nikki, she allows us the autonomy to pull different aspects of different curriculums, different approaches, and we can introduce them into our room if it works. It's wonderful. It works really well.
Good. And before you went to Reggio, what impressions did you have? What did you think Reggio would be like, the approach, the city, and so on?
A few of my colleagues and my manager at one time or another they've all, so 2 of my colleagues and my manager have been to Reggio Emilia previously. So there would have been quite a bit of chat around Reggio Emilia. I was informed that I would actually have to be there to really understand its true nature. You know, there was lots of talk of the creativity of the children, and you know what they were capable of doing, what they were given the autonomy to do. But they really did say you have to experience this for yourself before you realize what way it works and how amazing it is. But I mean, I did have huge expectations before I went, and I can honestly say they were all met and tenfold by what I witnessed
when you were there.
Yeah.
And I suppose before we go on to what you witnessed while you were there, Orla, I might ask you the same question. What was your, you know, heading off on the plane that day? What were you expecting, or you know, what were your kind of preconceptions of it?
That's more, I suppose, very similar to Anne. I had done my research over the years. A lot of our environments are very, you know, the aesthetics of the settings would reflect a lot of that, the Reggio Emilia thinking. However, I did understand it was a lot actually deeper actually than that. Kind of given that the history of kind of World War II, and I knew there was a lot more to learn. So hence actually my interest in actually being there and being present to it. And yeah, absolutely, it actually superseded all expectations. Yeah, and I suppose it just was to get into that, you know, the journey of education for the children, and you know that the relationships between the adults and the children, and actually creating sort of connections between the kind of ideas and environment, and seeing that really slow pedagogy that we're really becoming very familiar with in Ireland. That is seeing that happen, because that is in essence in Reggio Emilia, and that was magic. It was just actually that's the only word I could use for it, was magic. Yeah.
So your expectations were met as well.
Superseded, yeah.
Superseded.
Yeah.
So in what way? And I'll come back to you, Anne, in a second. So Orla, you know, I mean, I think it's lovely. You know, one of the big things we think about, I suppose, when we think of Reggio Emilia, is that image of the child as being, you know, capable and strong and competent and rich in potential and so on. And you've both kind of touched on that. So Orla, what did you see, and what exactly superseded your expectations for you?
Actually, Maura, it's a mindset. It's very difficult to pinpoint actually one thing, but it's the mindset of the individuals, the educators, that the parents, and this in turn, the effect that has on actually children, because they do see themselves as very confident and capable and absolutely equal within this. So it isn't just one aspect, it's everything is blended together to make this really rich experience, not just for the children, but for the parents, that the educators and a community. And I suppose, you know, I would see that in today's world, if we were to get like nothing else right, isn't really that what we're all aiming for, is a society where everyone is respected. And that was the one thing that I really struck me in every aspect of actually Reggio Emilia, was that respect. And you know, I can talk to you maybe more like later, like about the cook. The cook was actually central to everything that happened within these buildings. And you know, that was something I'm really interested in, and like learning more about, because you know, if we were to look at our Irish culture, I definitely think we can sort of contextualize that to work in Ireland, because we all love our food and we all love our family here. You know, our actual values are very similar. So that is something that I have learned, and I can actually definitely bring to Wexford, you know. And yeah, when I suppose if one thing that really stood out to me was that the level of respect and that value of each other. And yeah, that's I hope that answers it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing more about the cook. It reminds me of seeing in Denmark, I think a number of years ago, again, that bit where, that person who brought the food was, not just somebody who brought the food, but an integral part of the setting. And that even when she was back in the kitchen, they ran out of rice or something, and a little guy was sent off to get more rice in his bowl. So
and it's, I suppose, just to come back to that really slow pedagogy, all of that, even with the cook, it's all a process and a slow process of time, and there was no rush. That everything was taken at the children's pace, pure respect to, and it was beautiful to watch.
Yeah, and that, that slow is something I think maybe we used to have before, and that the pendulum is coming back, thankfully, in that direction again.
Yeah.
And what, you said as well that your expectations were exceeded. Can you tell us how?
The two settings that I visited whilst I was there, they had a piazza in the middle, like where the children come together, where the teachers come together, where they communicate with each other, they get to, hang out. It's like a meeting area. It's like the piazza that they have in the cities around Italy. I was just blown away by that. I was like, wow. I found it very, what they teach the children is very close to real life. I just thought that the piazza was really amazing, and the way Orlagh's talking about the cook, the children are allowed to go into the kitchen with a teacher nearby, of course. And I was kind of thinking to myself, God, would that ever be able to happen in our service, where the children are allowed to enter the kitchen? It's not just the cook, though, it's everybody who works in the service. They're like a huge big family, and the respect is very evident, and just the whole creativity side of things, like they want to make visible to the parents and the community how intelligent these children are, and everything is documented. And when we went into the settings, there was just so many different projects up on the wall in detail, exactly what the children were doing, how the project came about, and then lots of different visuals. I just thought that was absolutely amazing, and very close to real life. So an example would be the children were out in the forest and they came back with a piece of bark, and there was moss on the piece of bark. So the teachers they took a photograph of it, and then they hooked it up to a laptop. The laptop was then, it was projected. So this image was projected onto quite a large space, and the children were asked to draw their own interpretation of this piece of bark, but they were given different types of materials to do that. So there'd be watercolors or charcoal, poster paint, what else were they given? It was just like the creativity was off the charts, and it was all the child's work. There was a slight bit of adult involvement, but all the rest of all the creativity was the children's, and that's what really kind of struck me.
When we were chatting beforehand, I was saying about, before I went to Reggio, which I think is 10 or 11 years ago now, I had seen the intricate drawings on websites and so on that children had done, and I was kind of in disbelief about the intricacy of the drawings that very young children could do. And being there, just like that exposure to a variety of media at the children's own pace and from a very early age meant that they did have developed the competency to develop these very intricate drawings on their own with adults in a supporting role rather than a kind of directing role. It was, incredible. I think you've both touched on that idea of, and Melissa mentioned it in last week's episode, that bit of, you can be inspired by Reggio, but it's not an approach that transplants, that you have to contextualize it for, your own place, your own time, your own children. So maybe can I ask you both how, you're using those inspirations, the expectations that were exceeded, the magic you saw while you were there, and how you're bringing that back to Drumcondra and Enniscorthy to, use the inspiration of the ethos in your own individual context. And I might start with you on that one.
Okay, so there is already aspects of the approach throughout. It trickles through our service, but I think, and I also think that the partnerships with parents, whilst I was there and attending the lectures, a lot of what the lady was speaking about kind of rang through to me, and I was like, God, our service uses, bits and pieces of this ethos. Relationships with parents would be very important to us, and I'm sure likewise with Orlagh as well, in many settings around Ireland, there is that kind of staunch belief that parents are the child's first teacher, and that would be there was a lot of things that I realized that there were already, the Reggio Emilia approach was kind of already in our service. But when it was the creative side of things, when I came back, I spoke with my manager and I raised the issue of, the creativity, and I was kind of saying it's a bit too adult led. We have to try and work a way around the children's work being their work. So I was kind of saying the children would always ask for printed pages, and I kind of said to the kids, how about we don't use printed pages for today? I wasn't going to shock them and say we're never going to use printed pages again, because I think they'd be like, what? So I said, how about we don't use printed pages today? And how about we look at an image, or I'll print an image, let's say a butterfly. Let's print a picture from a butterfly in its natural habitat, and let's see how you do with that. And one of the children said to me, I don't know how to draw a butterfly. And it looked like she was actually quite distressed, because she kind of thought, how am I going to draw a butterfly? And I was kind of thinking to myself, oh my goodness, why is this child, really fretful about the thoughts of drawing her own creation? And I just said, well, you just draw, what you think about a butterfly may look like. We bought a few books whilst we were over there, and I opened a few of the books on the table, and I was like, look guys, look at they all knew that I'd been over in Italy, and I'd had a conversation with the kids and told them how I got on. And I was like, look guys, look at all these Italian children, this is all their artwork, and it's not a printed page, it's what's in their imagination. And it was like the penny dropped, and they were like, wow, we can do this. And like some of the artwork was just incredible that they came up with, instead of I don't know, I think over the years, printed pages have they're easy, and the kids, I think they're just so used to them now at this stage. But like when they start expressing themselves, I just thought it was, it was their own work. So that would be a huge thing that I would like to implement. What I would really like to see throughout the whole service is just the children's work, because it's the first thing that you see if you walk through a creche or if you walk by a door. There's always children's artwork in the windows, on the doors, and unfortunately a lot of it looks the exact same. And I would like the child's individuality, because all children are different and they can express themselves in so many different ways. Yeah, sorry if I rambled on there.
No, that's really important. It's, you're so right that kind of template approach can be very easy. It gives us a sense that there's a product to send home to parents, and you have something maybe for the scrapbooks or learning journals or whatever. But, going back to the image of the child bit, how much of it is that strong, capable child? And, really, what you've done, I think, is kind of dig into that idea of, do we really see children as competent and confident, or do we sometimes kind of pay lip service to it? So I wouldn't consider that rambling on at all. I think that was, really profound and well worth hearing. Thanks, Anne. And
Thank you.
Orla, for you in Wexford, how are you going
Yeah.
to contextualize what you saw?
Yes, so much. I suppose if I'm just like a managerial kind of an owner point of view, I come with the understanding that I'm going to bring back the knowledge that to share with my team. So I suppose one of the things I could see in the practice was kind of educators and the way they were helping our children kind of make meaning of their experiences out more completely, and digging and at provocations and drawing information out kind of with the children, and then actually that the documentation was extraordinarily simple. And I would like to mirror that. I sometimes think we get totally bogged down in Ireland, whereas to me, what I could see there was if it wasn't for the child, they had no interest in displaying it. So that was beautiful. And the observation, and it was sort of a continuous educator and child dialogue. It didn't finish until that child, and there was no actually tidying up or anything like that. If it wanted to go on for a day or 2 weeks, that was fine. The next thing was they were supported with all the provocations. It was totally self-exploring. And there was no sort of predetermined outcome, and I loved that. I could see sort of collaboration on all levels with the parents going in and out through the services, and with the educators and the child's that discussions. Even though it was in Italian, you could definitely see that the child was being included in the conversation between the educator and the parent, and that's so important. I think very often it can be seen as a handover as to what happened. Why wouldn't we involve the child in their day in just reporting exactly how they got on? So yeah, and it was, I could see sort of collaboration, between, it was just participation of the educator, that the child, and on just practical level, and it was really practical, was that community involvement. It was just part of who they were. So that was, so yeah, it's just the whole approach just embodies respect at every level, and that's just inspiring. And then I suppose, it's just the parents and that wider community. It's a really inclusive and almost a village style approach that engages all the children, and everyone is considered just an essential sort of component of the learning process. And it was, I suppose it was inspiring to see how actually proud they are of their culture and their city. you know, they really do hold, and you could see that with the children as well. They were delighted that to show me around their settings, and you know, there was just a huge amount of pride. So yeah, it was, for me, is to bring back the mindset of the way of thinking, of like slowing down, of everyone has a contribution to make, and you know, to value everybody. So yeah, it was just beautiful.
When you were talking about the documentation and you said extraordinarily simple, it's kind of not a concept that we're maybe familiar with here yet. I think we need to get more comfortable with the purpose of documentation, and then kind of pare it back a bit again.
Well, that was exactly what, you know, I remember saying to, you know, to one of the educators there, gosh, you know, it really does seem very easy. And she said, but who is it for? You know, you know, there didn't seem to be that sort of heaviness to it that I'm inclined to, you know, over the years, my training would have been, it was far lighter than that. And if it wasn't in the best interest of the child, they had no interest in it. So yeah, it was remarkable. Yeah.
But rich in its simplicity.
Rich in its simplicity.
You know,
and doable, you know, far more doable. Yeah.
I read something lately about, you know, it can be a drawback maybe of technology, and the apps can be, you know, so convenient for, you know, so many ways, and sustainability and saving paper and all of that. But a concern I have is sometimes the voice of the child is lost in that kind of documentation, that it's between the educator and the parent, and the child's voice can be harder to capture in that. And then the other thing that they said in this blog was about, you know, that parents come to expect very regular updates, which can take from the meaningfulness and the richness of what's actually happening. So finding a way to balance all of that.
And I suppose with my training with early childhood Ireland, actually writing the learning story to the child definitely keeps you centered on the child. You know, so I suppose it is certainly one way, you know, to mitigate that, as regards, you know, avoiding the whole observation, but like a learning story is far more meaningful.
And you've both touched on families and the importance of that family approach. And, you know, it's known, as you've both said, to be a very family oriented approach. And an article I was reading there lately, it's a Learning Teaching Scotland article, and there was a quote in it that struck me, and it says, to talk of a link between school and home is to undervalue what actually takes place in Reggio. In reality, it's not so much that families take part in the life of the school, but rather that together with the children and the teachers, they are the school. And I think, you know, in what you've both said, that's come across, that sense of community that's generated by the involvement and very active participation of parents. Is there anything either of you would like to add to that? And, you know, in terms of that involving parents, you mentioned earlier about, you know, that the idea of the parents being the first educators, and, you know, is there anything more from your experience in Reggio that you're bringing back?
I would consider, as I've said, as I've mentioned before, the parent, teacher, child relationship. It's a three-way. It's not just the teacher and the child, or the child and the teacher. It's a nice harmonious relationship that involves all three, you know, the parent, the child, and the teacher. So I wouldn't have brought anything back that we wouldn't have done here previously. You know, what I did witness over in Italy with the parents being involved, I think that's how I would have approached things. And
And that's
You
great to, you know, when you have something that you do confirmed and validated, it, you know, builds confidence as an educator too, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it does. I would, you know, any parents who I've, you know, communication with, they'd, you know, they'd be highly involved with their child. And I think it's important that we as teachers, you know, involve the parents. As I did say, that, you know, the child's parents are their first teacher, and we work together as a team, and we support each other, and it's all for the child's, you know, best interest, and to support the child to grow and learn. And it's a wonderful relationship, I think.
That's great. You know, it's so valuable to really see parents as partners. It's integral to that sense of community. Orla, did you want to add something there?
Actually, very similar, Jan. I suppose it was heartening for me to see that our kind of culture is remarkably similar to it in our sense of values of family. So it's as I say, it was heartening because we actually do the vast majority of it, and I'd say we're pretty close to being. I would like to think on par with it. However, you know, that the creativity and the observation aspect is actually slightly different, and that, you know, that's the whole rationale of being there, is to bring over those things. However, you know, Reggio Emilia is completely different, so it's important just to contextualize it into Ireland and into Wexford, into like a rural setting. However, it's very manageable and very doable.
Great. So thank you both so much for taking the time to talk to us today. We really appreciate your time and your impressions, and you know, I think it's really heartening to hear, well, actually it confirmed what we do already. We're pretty much there already. This is what we'll take from it. This is what we learn from. But you know, where our practice is up there in some regards, and I think that's a really good thing to come back from a study trip with, is that kind of validation of what you're doing and inspiration to build on more. So, and Orla, thank you both very much for taking the time.
Actually, thank you, Maura.
Thank you, Maura.
So thank you for listening to this episode of Early Childhood Ireland's podcast, which is proudly supported by Aricus Insurance. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and spread the word about the podcast to your friends and colleagues, and stay tuned for our next episode.